Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in this lovely world on your own screen. Welcome to the 303rd CRMKonvo show, today with our guest, Bhawani Shankar. And in this episode of the CRMKonvo, we dive deep into the engine room of the modern enterprise with Bhawani. Bhawani is a techno-commercial veteran who has spent decades at the intersection of go-to-market strategy and technology, including senior leadership roles at Gartner, HCL Tech, Cognizant, and major consultancies. Today, as the CEO of Luminant Works Global, he is on a mission to bridge the gap between fragmented data silos and the promise of Agentic AI. We'll explore why Bhawani calls AI without clean data a Ferrari without wheels, and how organizations can move beyond basic data cleansing to build a foundation for autonomous customer experiences. Bhawani, welcome to our show. The floor is yours. What have I missed in the introduction? What you would love to add?
Now, that was a pretty good introduction, Ralph. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here today and to talk about, something that's very, very close to our hearts, which is data modernization. I actually enjoyed that music in the intro as well. I mean, quite catchy. I was almost starting to sway. Look, yeah, I mean, look, data modernization itself isn't nothing new. I mean, we've consolidated, cleaned, cloudified, modernized for a long time. I mean, and we've gone through file-based and big data and Hadoop, etc. But I think the real turning point has been in the last, 2 to 3 years as Agentic AI has hit the road, growing out from generative AI. And clearly, I think we should all agree that it is more or less irreversible for the industry. And therefore, the importance of data that you can trust the agents with has become all the more important. And that's the context of Luminant Works Global. I mean, in many ways, we've sort of pivoted towards providing trusted data foundations for agentic use. And it's really, to my mind, in the early stages, because a lot of AI proponents are still looking at what they think is a very shiny Ferrari. It is expensive, not just in dollar terms, because the changes required are not just in getting the keys to that, supercar. There are many other things that need to change around the enterprise in order to make that investment viable, useful, productive, in the direction and on the road that you want to take it. But when you buy a Ferrari, you look at the shine and the color and the seats and the controls, but you never see what kind of tires and wheels it has. I mean, right? So that to us sort of encapsulates the status of industry. Yeah, thank you for that.
To stay in the picture, I mean, Ferraris are around for some time.
Yes.
And looking at data, clean data, the need for clean data is around for some time too.
Absolutely.
I mean, looking at predictive analytics, for example, that predicts a weird future if the underlying data is weird.
Absolutely.
So why now? Why did it appear now? Because actually nothing really changed.
I think that's a great question, Thomas. I mean, like I said, it's not new. Data cleanup is nothing new. The Ferrari is nothing new. And if you look at that as a layered model, two things. One is data consolidation, particularly, and data cleanup was done for reasons of convenience. It was done for reasons of cost. It was done for reasons of not just data consolidation, but vendor consolidation. And I'd love to talk about the buying patterns of technology. I mean, I've been an analyst in Gartner, and it doesn't go away. I mean, the analyst in you stays with you. So, I mean, enterprises have had data debt and technology debt of various kinds that's usually only grown. I've never seen, at least in the pre-agentic era, a conscientious move towards reducing technology debt for business and not just for operational and cost reasons. So I think that's what governed data consolidation, organization in the pre-agentic era. So if you look at data as foundational, and the use of data in analytics and business actions, if you will, as a top layer, agentic comes in the middle of that sandwich. And I think that's what changed everything, because now you take the data logic and feed it to the agent, and then you can use data science and predictive analytics and agentic analytics, if I can also call it, to do various other things. So I think that was a real big change. And while you could live with messy data by overlaying it with various manual means, I don't think that's an option in the agentic era.
I totally agree. Coming from the aspect in a bit more less scientific approach, if you have smelly data hidden in some of the caves, as we had one CRMKonvo where we said that a lot of people keep data and do not clean it, and at a sudden it is disturbingly mismatching and giving the wrong guidance. The thing is, the Ferrari picture again, you are not allowed to drive a Ferrari if you not have taken a driver's training by Ferrari. They won't sell you the car.
Yeah.
The interesting aspect is, such as is your advisory. You try to give people the proper advice, what
Correct.
to get best out of their data, which is existing after they have done a bit cleaning and make it shine.
Absolutely. I think that's that's a very apt description of the state that we're in and the work that we do. In fact, it's only today that we put out a very interesting LinkedIn post where, in terms of getting that training and the user saying, after that training, I want to take it for a test drive, right? And again, this is a metaphorical analogy. The salesman turns around and says, "What the hell? You want to test drive a Ferrari? You don't know what a Ferrari is and what it does? I've told you everything about what it does, the engine growl, the torque, etc. And you still want to test drive it?" I think agentic is kind of in the same mode, because you are being almost forced to believe. Maybe forced is a strong word. I think there's a herd instinct, right? You've got to do it to be politically and business-wise correct, right? There's various other layers. I mean, there's inertia and resistance at various layers in the enterprise, but I think generally that's become the accepted truth, right? So, and of course, that complicates in various ways as well.
Some friends of ours, which are regularly in more or less amount of time, one regularly now, found it out of the own business experience and founding companies that with these upcoming tools, it can be very encouraging to utilize, by proper utilized data, the decision madness into a proper way. They call it the brief. And what they do is guide decision makers on the C-level as one target group. And with what I see is that in the old age, we had the golden data set, the golden record. Now, what Clint Oram, as one of our former guests, mentioned is that utilizing AI is often a problem of the proper context with it.
Yeah.
Thomas described it as that we need something like the golden context these days.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. No, I think it's a very, very valid concept, because if you look at agentic, if you look at the deployment of agents with clean data, for instance, I think this isn't a just a technology change. I mean, if you look at what needs to change in your HR sphere and your finance sphere and your business and sales sphere and your management sphere, at a macro level, entire businesses and the business universe is changing, right? I mean, the fact that we're replacing low-level administrative tasks with agents is just the tip of the iceberg, right? There's an interesting study of the labor market by Stanford University. It's an annual event. It had a very interesting statistic which said entry-level software jobs, for instance, are dropping off the cliff. But more senior profiles and the hires into that cadre, which is anything from, say, late 30s onwards, right up to 50, 55, and even higher, those brackets are hiring more and more people, which we would all expect, right? But if you fast forward, let's say, 10 years, when maybe, let's say, 20% of that top bracket has retired or ceased to be in whatever shape and form, where is the entry level that will mature to that level, right? So even from a people perspective, I think we're underestimating the degree of change that will be needed. And I think the whole context changes. The context of how you do business will change. So I think the transition from record to context is absolutely right, not just in the data sense, but in every sense of business. Now, the golden context from a data perspective obviously has implications on governance, again, going from static to dynamic. It's got implications for accountability, which was basically a checklist and a set of static policies which go from, static to dynamic again. So I think every part of the process that underlies agentic, and every part to the left and the right and top and bottom from a business perspective, is changing, and it has to change. Right? Now, if you look at CRM itself, and I could go on about this for a long time. So
just
stop
do
me
it.
to think.
No.
So if you look at CRM alone, again, a system of record becoming a system of context, it's been happening for some time, right? The way customer interaction takes place has been changing for a long time, not the least of which has been the last decade or so chatbots. Not the least of which is different forms of gathering customer data. And in today's age, marketing campaigns, for instance, aren't like these large programs which get planned over weeks and deployed over months. You can plan, design, and run marketing campaigns literally within hours for everything from one person to a million customers or more, right? So as that process has become more dynamic, your pulse of the market becomes more dynamic. So your marketing campaigns are constantly fueling and bringing in data about the effectiveness of that campaign. Your sales conversations are bringing near real-time data about what our customers are saying. There is sentiment analysis across channels which are constantly feeding data into your CRM universe. So you've got to take all of that into account, right? So it is very much a context, and build, dynamic guardrails and governance. So data quality needs to be adaptive. Data quality isn't a static. Governance needs to be dynamic. It's not static. So on and so forth. So I think absolutely. I think context with a C is the new king with a K.
Checking a bit about governance. I mean, making that dynamic is kind of a contradiction in itself, because governing something is about keeping it stable, means to some extent static. So how do we avoid a nightmare if we need to have governance almost agile?
Yeah, I mean, look, well, this may not be the most correct answer, at least not all of it. Look, a lot of us are trained to be ungovernable, right? Especially people who are in the business call phase, salespeople, and I've been there myself. I mean, when I ran the business and P&L at either HCL, Cognizant, Wipro, etc. I mean, there was a level of governance that was expected of salespeople, and we are, by nature, wild. And I can tell you the technicalities of, dynamic governance, etc., etc. But I think, to my mind, fear, FUD, and fear are transient, but greed is permanent. So I think, to my mind, there isn't one capsuled answer, but I think you've got to build in, on the one hand, the right incentives for governance. A lot of governance needs to be encoded and embedded rather than obtrusive and from the top. A lot of access to information and data, for instance, need to be relooked at, especially in the context of trust, and of course, cyber and various other things. So I think, I mean, to my mind, it won't be easy. I mean, a lot of us talk about governance not being the policy and the checklist, etc., and becoming more a business requirement. Yes, I mean that's absolutely all there. But I think in terms of how, I mean, when the rubber hits the road, I think there is a trade-off. I mean, maybe there is, the domain and the data ownership needs to be with the functions in the business, while the rules and the policies which are encoded are kind of from the outside, and you try and balance the two. Honestly, I don't think it's a prickly path. I don't think you can build technological solutions, but I think at a human level, it's not going to be easy.
Did you say you don't think one can build technological solutions?
You can technologically.
Okay, so I just was wondering.
It's more the human side of things.
Yeah, I'd agree that without the humans, technology doesn't really work. So they need to want to use it.
Yeah.
So, but how to combine technology with humans wanting to use it then, or with us wanting to use it then? I love your sales rep example, or your sales example, because there are a couple of mavericks around there who just want to be able to do what they want to do when they want to do, and their management / leadership, if it's leadership, doesn't like that much. So then there, of course, is a kind of a power gap in between those two stakeholder groups.
Yeah.
And well, there needs to be a joint objective. But
Yeah.
how do I make them want to be governed in
Let
an
me
agile way?
yeah. Let me sort of extend that sales analogy. And by the way, it doesn't have to be sales. I'm using sales as a motif, if you like,
No
because
problem with that.
yeah.
Usually we bash banks and airlines.
Yeah. Many years ago, when I was at the receiving end of this and managing a team of very ambitious, very earnest, and quite aggressive salespersons, it was um, quite difficult for the salespeople to understand CRM governance and entering data into Salesforce or Salesforce automations, et cetera, which of course still exists as a big problem today, right? Even in those days, to my mind, um, a lot of technologists missed the boat in terms of automating or at least integrating, for instance, my calendar of meetings with clients and other entities, together with whatever sales platforms and CRM platforms that we used. Um, we could, for instance, look at whom we called, call records from my phone or my mobile phone within the realms of privacy, trust, etc. I mean, it would have been quite easy for me to go, or any salesperson to go in there in the morning to say my meetings of yesterday and potentially the outcome of those meetings has already been templated and partly filled, if not fully filled, right? What was to stop us putting a transcription engine into Teams 5 years ago, 6 years ago? The technology existed, right? Look, I mean, that's history, but all I'm saying is it is possible to get the guardrails and the governance become dynamic technologically without being obtrusive. Make it embedded as much as possible. And then if you build, maybe it's a combination of FUD and incentive, people like incentives. And I think the overhead of manual governance versus agentic governance or automated governance should give you enough leeway to incent the right behaviors in the right fashion. To my mind, that's the most practical solution, right? Which combines what you can technically do with what is practical at a human level. And I can go on about agentic use cases that can make this happen across various other functions as well.
Now let me play a little devil's advocate here. So well, first a little segue. If you are saying agentic governance is the job of management, means agents can replace management. This is a good statement, but
some of it, not all. At least the information gathering, definitely it can be.
But let's look at it from the angle of governance as well. So if governance takes away my freedom, and my freedom takes away, well, creates a bottleneck in the terms of salespeople, a sales bottleneck, then of course, because, well, if I can't do what's right, because I of course do what's right, what else? And the system prevents me from doing that, well, then the revenue won't come, which is not good. So doesn't governance create a bottleneck? Agentic or not?
Well, I mean, Thomas, that's what I meant when I said that no matter how easy or difficult the regime, there will always be mavericks. You can lower the bar, but there'll be people who won't want to cross it or not, depending on their behavior, no matter what the bar, right? So, I mean, that's what I meant, that set it at a practical level, try and automate or identify it as much as possible. But I think it's got to be in some ways tiered, right? Make the easy stuff fairly easy, but where it is more sensitive, scrutinize it a bit more, increase the bar, heighten the bar a little bit there. Try and codify it, try and encode it, try and embed it, and make it unobtrusive as much as you can, right? I mean, those are the
Mhm.
principles of it, right? But I think, to my mind, and again, I've lived across the table. My first serious job was on the client side. I ended up as a deputy CIO. Then I became a consultant and advisor, including at Gartner. Then I became a supplier partner. To my mind, I think it is always a balance. I think
Mhm.
there will be tensions. I don't think the tensions will ever go away.
But doesn't prevent this regime of tiered governance the generation of or collection of good data, of quality data. I mean,
Oh, yes.
if
Yeah.
I take more care of cleanliness here than there, then there the data probably will not be clean or even clean enough,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is probably a need as well because the context gets fuzzy.
Absolutely, absolutely. No, I think I mean, if I understand you correctly, we're talking of two things. I mean, governance in the context of data quality. I mean, data quality itself needs to become adaptive as well, right? I mean, that is not a static number there. But I think if you look at, I mean, like I said, the structured tiering of it, and if you have the right incentives, I mean, quite honestly, in one of the recent MDM implementations we did in an insurance company. Um, After the initial experimentation of about 3 to 4 months, with the right incentives, people actually welcomed it, right? Because they were comparing it with what used to be actually a pretty tight regime, and then they are here in a I'd hate to call it a regime. It was far more open and easier to use. In that regime, they saw the manual overload as much less. There were incentives to following the guidelines
Mhm.
set, and and it wasn't like Big Brother was standing over you, which was the case before. Right? So I think,
Mhm.
look, I think in many ways it also depends on the business that you're in, regulated, unregulated, etc., etc. But I think it's a touch and feel thing. I mean, business and management have to come together and make it practical, because the dangers of not doing it are
Mhm.
huge. And I think um, again, going back to the sales analogy, if there's a threat to a salesperson not making his or her number, and thereby a threat to his or her incentive and bonus and options, etc., they will do it. They will do it.
Mhm.
Incentive linked governance, if I can call it that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
who, who should be made responsible for it? This sounds
Good.
like it's someone somewhere in the revenue arena.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Look, I think in the old regime, I often pitied the CROs, because it's almost as if figuratively you are you are tying the news, either loosely or tightly, depending on the organization, on one person or one entity, right?
Mhm.
Whereas the constituents that made revenue happen was spread across the organization, right?
Mhm.
Now, in an agentic world, from a metric perspective, um, you know, what I see emerging is an evolved version of the sales versus revenue metric. You could call it sales effectiveness, because when you identify a certain process, be that functional or a business process, you also gain more and more transparency into the cost of doing it. So the cost of revenue and making it contextual to a particular customer or a process becomes iteratively easier. So I see sales effectiveness and sales that leads to revenue. I mean, $1 of cost giving you $10 of revenue. I mean, that kind of a metric, to my mind, will be the key metric. Hundreds and thousands of what I would call vanity metrics should go away. I mean, I have 20 subscribers, or I made 15 presentations last week, or I've got 3 hits or 30 hits or 300 hits. I mean, those mean nothing, right? I think, to my mind, the CRO function should become increasingly the owner of the constituents of cost, because that's been their problem. I mean, they're responsible for the top line, but they have little or medium or degrees of control on the constituents of cost that go into making that revenue happen. So I think transparency and transforming and allocating that cost of sale versus the revenue, to my mind, will become a key metric. And of course, the cost of governance and the cost of incenting also will become a part of that, to allude to the previous question you had. And of course, from there, you can have so many other sub-metrics which will become important from a metric perspective, which could be customer value or lifetime value, customer acquisition cost, which of course is a part of that constituent set of costs that go into making revenue. But I really think from a cost perspective, the budgetary allocation of how much you can consume, whether it is for governance or XYZ or in the function that leads to revenue, I think that could become a ownership that's part of the CRO mandate.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense?
Makes sense, yeah. Looking a little back at the data. So you're said incentive-driven governance, which is very likely a helper in, well, having someone enter proper data as opposed to bogus data into the system, which then will be helpful as well. Now, I now might think that the best possibility of getting good, clean data into the system is not having a human enter it at all, but doing
Correct.
that more or less
Absolutely.
automatically. So
Absolutely.
how can we achieve that these days? Because I mean, there still is lots of, let's say, silos around, systems that do not really talk to each other, and vendors that do not want to talk to each other because they want to control the orchestration or the data themselves instead of giving it to the other vendor that might be also there in the same business. So they are all not in a monoculture IT environment. So what strategies do you see to achieve that?
Yeah. Look, I think first we got to fix the data silos within the firewall, within the enterprise. I mean, that itself will be quite an achievement in itself. And I think to a large extent, as you do that, we will certainly in the enterprise space, we will look at that ecosystem as well, the ones that sit in the periphery. So for instance, whether it is supply chain data or supply chain sustainability reporting that is now a norm in many countries, you've got to be able to have a level of governance over the data across the ecosystem, not just across your enterprise. And agentification and agentic AI isn't constrained to the organization. It's an industry-wide thing. It is a cross-industry thing, right? So if you're doing data cleanup for feeding agents in your enterprise, most of the rest of the world hopefully is doing that too. And I think we're now, well, we're still a very young organization, but I can genuinely say that month by month, the awareness of that is, of course, on the increase. So, to my mind, the need for the cleanup of data and the awareness of that being increasing will be a major contributor to that, right? And of course, like you say, try and automate that as much as possible. I don't think it, like I said earlier, you don't need a sort of an external intrusive layer for data collection. A lot of this can already become agentic. It could have become automated, maybe not agentic, many years ago. So I think the agentification of that data collection process required for instance, governance will become agentic to a large extent.
Where's the difference between automatic and agentic data cleansing?
Yeah, well, I mean, automation is, if I paraphrase many years of automation, it's hard-coded automation, whereas in the agentic world, we're talking about a less deterministic. It is a self-learning, probabilistic, if you like, but you can control that uncertainty, of course. So deterministic automation versus agentic. I mean, that's the difference that I made.
How do people get aware, like those old white-haired men like myself, at least partially,
And me.
and which are traditional as marketing persons did to mailings, to mail shots just for data cleaning in the summertime and for Christmas naturally, and then the lists were proper again. How do we get this periodic cleansing towards a cool, automatic, agentic supported, responsible cleaning, and that we again, like the loop or the flywheel, as it's said by other people, that we have something in place for data and for data cleansing?
Yeah. I think if you're talking about periodic cleansing versus dynamic cleansing, I mean, if that's what you're referring to. Look, I think there are two or three sides to this. One is, and again, this is a vision that a lot of us share in the data industry, if I can call it that. When you look at cleansing data, for instance, with a master data management schema, what's happening there is the master data management at a metadata level has a number of connectors, right? Very simple. We've done that for a while. And the more the connectors you have, the more you recognize different shapes, colors, sizes, t-shirts of data, the more you can connect them together. So they become more contiguous and usable in one frame. I mean, that's the fundamental philosophy of MDM. The way we see this evolving, and this isn't today, but it's I would say a midterm vision for a start, is that agents will be able to find the data and connect with it rather than us building connectors, right? So the agentification of MDM itself is a future that a lot of data companies are mapping out. It's not here now. I think I'm personally still in the, if I can call it, the evangelistic stages of telling the aspiring Ferrari driver that he still needs to look at the wheels, right? But to my mind, it's a matter of time. If you recognize that data modernization and cleansing and quality are important, to my mind, the fuse from there to agentifying data currency itself, if I can call it that, is a matter of time. right? So that it becomes very dynamic, and it doesn't necessarily mean that the MDM toolkit has to be brought out every time you smell something dirty, right? So that's one side of it. The by the way, I'm hoping it's later rather than sooner, because obviously, from a data service perspective, it affects a lot many people in the industry. I think it requires a level of maturity for that to happen. There's also the question of how real time do you really need it to be? How current do you really need it to be? Because currency and real time as a paradigm we've talked about in various contexts across the industry for decades, right? And I think the general consensus is, yeah, it's a good paradigm, but real time to a good enough level is okay, right? And like you said, a lot of us, gray haired, white haired, etc. I mean, we've been through um, franking machines and postage stamps and various physical paraphernalia, and we are at a level of automation where we still, yeah, yeah. So look, I mean, if you take let's say the average handling time of a customer call from X to X by 2 by agentic means, that's a good development for the foreseeable future. Yes, it might go to X by 100 in the future, but I think in the foreseeable future, let's say the next 2 to 5 to 6 to 7 years, it's pretty good. So I think real time with a practical paint on the box, right? And currency to the level where it is fit for purpose. You can improve iteratively if you choose. You can improve in quantum jumps if you please. I mean, that's the pace that you choose. But equally, the pace dictates the evolving nature of the agent. I mean, if you want the agent to be self-learning, you've got to be realistic and not feed it so much data that it can't digest. And the degree of stability of the system is at stake, right? So, I mean, to my mind, those are considerations you'd have in the context of the currency of data.
You just said something interesting, like agentifying MDM. Now, before that, you said that context with C becomes king with K, which
Yes.
which implies that transactional data actually needs to become far more interesting than master data, which in itself is well, it's called master data because it's fairly static.
Yeah.
So how, in that sense, is MDM enough? Or can it be enough in future? Because the majority of context comes from moving data, from transactional, from behavioral data.
Yeah. Look, I think, don't shoot me for being controversial here. I mean, despite being a data champion and a data service company, I would say...
Let me interrupt there. We would shoot you for not being controversial.
Okay. Look, MDM, to my mind, is legacy terminology. What it actually means is connected data. So data that is connected. Of course, there are hygiene aspects to that, which is deduplication, and we don't want 15 Ralph Corbs in any CRM system that don't talk to the R Corbs in the fulfillment system. All that hygiene stuff is there. But I think from a context perspective, we want the data to be connected. Because when you come back to the kiosk and say, I want a new phone, you want to be able to connect to the historic and transactional data together to say, yeah, this is a good offer for Ralph Corp, right? So focusing on that, to my mind, it's data. It's not master data as a golden record. It is connected data in the golden context, right? Now, the golden context give you contextual data that is important for the transaction at that point, right? And again, good enough, not necessarily super shiny Ferrari real time, right? So, I mean, that to my mind is a practical view, right? Uh,
Yeah.
everything can be contextual if there's a use case that's relevant, because you could come and complain that your four-year-old phone isn't working, so we need that data from 4 years ago. So
Yeah. I was wondering, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation, that you are very keen in guiding, advising. What is your recipe to make it work instead of another proof of concept, which gets costly?
yeah, yeah. Look, there's no dearth of companies out there who will clean up your data, whether in an MDM context, for an agent, or otherwise. There's no dearth of it. And when through the past year, particularly when we repivoted ourselves as a data service partner who will feed your agents, um, to a large extent, we wanted to go back to first principles and say, what is it that we can do differently?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, given our experience, that we wanted to address is the fact that there is a lot of what I'd call starting trouble in data modernization, right? Like we've discussed before, it's one of those things that happen for different reasons, for cost, not necessarily for business reason and for clean data and agentic and serving a business outcome. A lot of data science and predictive analytics tried to do that, but because it wasn't contextual and agentic and real time enough, a lot of those were still static systems. But I think in this age, two things we needed to do. We needed to look and weigh and evaluate data in the context of an agentic use case. What is it that you want the agent to do, right? That dictates what kind of data you want. And if that's the thought process, then why not make the sampling and the auditing and the testing and the assessment of the data itself agentic? Because we had a rule book, we had our due diligence manual, as do many others in the business. We hadn't thought of agentifying that until we got to I'd say the early weeks of 2025. So to cut a long story short, we built an agent that makes the assessment of how good your data landscape is
Okay.
entirely agentic, right? To my mind, that was the first step. And then, of course, the next step is based on what we know about your data, can I create real impact? Because agents are all about outcome and revenues and business impact, etc. Be they internal or external, it's still about impact. So can we create impact by data modernization very quickly? So we've got this 90-day framework, if you will, where the first 2 weeks of the engagement, we typically do not just one, but multiple assessments. And these typically take consultants weeks of work. And you can call me biased, but very often they aren't accurate, because much like an agent, if you give the consultant, 10 ring binders, he or she will read those and do the assessment on that basis. Whereas, to my mind, an agentic assessment can be far less subjective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the agent can get the context much better. So if you say, I'm a shoemaker who produces 10,000 units every month, and I'm based in this village near Frankfurt, it can get the context much better than a human can, right? and give you the assessment in the context of the business and the agentic use case much better, right? So one of the features of the agent, by the way, she's called Aria, ARIA. One of the features of this is it comes up with an action roadmap. So it looks at 6 dimensions, everything from your agentic use case effectiveness. It looks at your governance, your data quality, your leadership and culture, et cetera, and comes up with a plan to say what you should do to get your data ready, what you should do to get your organization ready for agents. And we divide that into 3 sections. One is called now. Do this right now, or else you risk regulatory penalties or whatever else, right? And then there's a next set of actions which you can do in the short term, and then a later, which is, as you get more mature, go into those actions. So we immediately get into thinking about what is the first pilot, what is the first proof of concept, what is the first business impact that we can do, right? And we were able to take that very quickly, maybe in the 3rd week itself, 3rd week, 4th week, into a sandbox environment, and then show at least some impact within 90 days. To my mind, I think that's a great example of, the agentification of the data cleansing process itself, right? And we've done this time and time again. And again, not to sort of put a fine point on it, but I don't see any other agentic data readiness assessment tool in the market. There are many good tools, but they're not agentic. They still take weeks, and a lot of the consultants will drain you of quite a few dollars in your pocket. Ours, sorry.
Agentic tools, yes or no? What we currently see in the market is a proliferation of, let's call it, data clouds, without alleging one brand here. So, which are basically consolidated databases under a bunch of systems. Now, that to some extent also is a play to not only harmonize data, but also harmonize it on my infrastructure and not on yours. So, which creates a lock-in effect, which may or may not be good. What would you advise in how to avoid this? Because to some extent, it's good to have this one database underneath it, be it, well, vendor A, B, C, or D, which helps in keeping data consistent, contextual, so useful, which also probably diminishes the need for a checking tool. But it also ties buyer to vendor for good as well as for bad, in good times and in bad times. So, and I bet that the bad times are coming sooner rather than later in this kind of environment. What do you think can or should buyers do to avoid this, well, to avoid the bad times?
Thomas, it's time for me to be the bad guy again.
Yes.
Look, it's a two-way street. And I mean, like I said, during my Gartner analyst days, and since then, and as a supplier partner to enterprises, we all know enterprise buying is to a large extent tribal. After a degree of maturity, either in a technology product or a service, in the early stages, there may be points of differentiation, but very quickly, the points of differentiation between vendor A and vendor B starts to narrow, if not go away completely. Their approaches may be different, but the end games tend to be quite similar. So then you tend to start taking decisions. And by the way, I'm not saying this is good or bad. It is tribal. You tend to take decisions that are not necessarily entirely objective, there is a subjective creep into it. You take decisions of vendor choice because X company has done it and they're doing very well. You take recommendations, you take case references, you take, all of that. And of course, the super salesman comes into the room and does an amazing presentation. And there is a lot of charisma and presence and personality and belief in what they say, right? Bottom line, vendor lock-in, a lot of buyers take decisions very knowingly, right? So it is a two-way street, right? Now, a lot of the time, vendor lock-ins are also commercially good decisions, right? You consolidate vendors onto one platform, you save a lot of money, etc., etc. You could say procurement took a sword to my throat, yeah, maybe, but it was commercially a good decision, and it was simple. So there are a lot of good reasons and bad reasons why it is tribal, but old habits die hard, and tribal habits hardly ever die. I don't think it's going to be any different in the agentic era. I think, to give you a practical answer, aside from the dose of reality, try and keep the data and the record separate from the usage of the data from a data perspective. That could be one. You could keep the federated record layer outside of the AI platform. That's kind of what we meant. You could have more control over the metadata, for instance, or you could, absolutely no direct coupling between systems. Always use, API and interfaces. You can also, as many of us think we do, but some of us do not so good a job of that. You could negotiate contractually for rights to export data and whatever else that you think there is a lock-in. But and by the way, you could even test that strategy by staging various scenarios, war games, etc. Right? But I honestly think, and this is me, not just as a supplier partner, but having been through that entire cycle, I think a lot of tribal buying will subsist. There will be subjective elements to it. Vendor lock-in has a very negative connotation. There are some good commercial aspects to it. There are some not so good commercial aspects to it. At the end of the day, from a relationship perspective, the buyer and the seller have to have good chemistry for being good chemistry reasons for being together. You got to make it work. That's what I mean.
Okay. Looking at the time.
Well, it's that
because
time
we almost need to wrap,
right.
Which means our lightning round of questions is due,
right.
overdue actually. So 5 questions, 5 answers.
Okay,
when the question is short, the answer shall be short too.
Great.
Let's give it a run. So if you had to choose perfectly clean data that is, let's say, a week old or 2 now, that you could have, or 70% clean data that is real time, what would you choose?
No, I think a week-old data is not bad, quite honestly. If you look at the entire context of things that we've discussed, the lack of determinism and the need for the agents to be self-learning, I think week-old is okay.
Okay.
I go for what is the one metric a CEO should look at every Monday to judge their organization's AI readiness.
I think, to my mind, the business lag between when you start and end a decision is a very key thing. If you haven't constricted and shortened that, you're in danger in the agentic world.
True or false? Most companies should stop collecting half of the data that they collect right now.
I think I would largely agree. I think the degree of dirt in data is definitely an impediment. Focus on the top three categories of data that you think is most important.
Is agentic AI a marketing buzzword or a fundamental shift in how we architect CRM?
To my mind, it is already a fundamental shift, right? Because if you don't believe that this is a fundamental business shift, then I think you're living under a stone.
Okay, so last but not least, what's the first legacy system that an enterprise should shut off in order to speed up their AI data strategy?
What I would call shadow data, just like shadow IT that lives in the corners and the caves. Anything that is not visible and in the shadows, kill it.
So no more Excel.
Absolutely. No Excel, nothing unstructured, stuff that you've sucked out of Outlook. Absolutely no.
Okay, thanks, Bhawani. That's been great.
Absolutely.
Also,
thank you very much, guys. I really enjoyed this.
yeah.
And a good shout out to the CRMKonvo.
Yeah, and well, thanks to everybody who still is in there, who we did not chase off. Maybe you're in next week as well, when we dive into whether AI in sales is really your friend, or whether it's rather a foe. with
I
our
miss
friend,
it.
not foe, Ganeshi here.
Thank you very much,
Till
guys.
then,
Thank you. Yeah.
see you
care.
next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.